A Russian spy ship has been prowling European shores, lurking near the cables that carry the continent's internet and power and communications. NATO officers say it's no accident. If those lines were cut, economies and militaries could be crippled. We'll look at what the Kremlin is up to, I think they're up to shenanigans, and how the West is responding. We begin today off the coast of Europe, where a Russian spy ship called Yantar has been drawing serious attention from NATO. On the surface, it looks like an ordinary blue and white research vessel, but below decks, it's loaded with surveillance gear, submersibles, and divers trained for deep-sea espionage. Its mission is to map, monitor, and, if ordered, sabotage the undersea cables that Europe relies on to function. A Financial Times investigation, backed by satellite radar data, tracked Yantar last year as it slipped through European waters. At one point, it went dark, shutting off its location signals while lingering in the Irish Sea. That's where three major data cables connect Ireland to the UK. For hours, the ship hovered above them. Now, NATO commanders, they know what she's doing there, right? It's not a mystery. They've tracked Yantar shadowing cable routes, pausing at key junctions, and moving on. And the movement of the ship gives them, obviously, major cause for concern. Nearly all of the UK's digital communications run through subsea fiber optic cables. 3/4 of its gas supply flows undersea through pipelines. These are essentially the veins and arteries of modern life, carrying phone calls, bank transfers, military commands, timing signals that financial markets depend on, and connectivity to a host of other critical activities. If Russia cut or corrupted those cables, the fallout would be immediate and severe. There could be blackouts, of course, across Britain, data traffic crippled, NATO's undersea surveillance system blinded, and entire economies thrown into chaos. And all of that could be done without firing a shot in what's known as the gray zone of modern conflict. The unit behind these missions is one of Russia's most secretive organizations. It's referred to as the Directorate of Deep Sea Research, known by its acronym GUGI, or GUGI, which really doesn't strike fear in anybody's heart, but it's a serious directorate. The name is a cover. It doesn't do research, obviously. It does espionage and sabotage. It runs a fleet of subs and deep-diving equipment, some capable of operating 6,000 meters below the surface, 10 times deeper or so than most military submarines. And unlike Russia's Navy, the GUGI, or GUGI, doesn't answer to naval commanders. It reports directly to the Ministry of Defense and, in practice, often takes its orders from the GRU, that's Russia's military intelligence service. Western intelligence has been tracking GUGI operations for decades. Its headquarters is at Olenya Guba on the Barents Sea, a place the CIA has been watching since the Cold War. Satellite imagery shows new barriers across the bay and upgraded security, all to shield GUGI's operations from prying eyes. For a while, after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, GUGI activity slowed down. Perhaps Moscow didn't want to provoke NATO too openly. But by late 2023 and into 2024, the pattern changed. Russian vessels, including Yantar, were seen loitering around British waters for over a year straight. And NATO analysts concluded Moscow was no longer holding back. They'd tested Western responses, and they decided the risk was worth it. The activity hasn't gone unnoticed, of course, by the British government. Earlier this year, Defense Secretary John Healey issued a rare public warning, saying Russia's undersea surveillance was a sign of, quote, growing aggression. That's a classic British understatement. So what exactly could Yantar do? Naval experts say it has the capacity to drop submersibles equipped with manipulator arms. These could tap into cables, siphon off information, or plant explosives for later sabotage. Another possibility, tampering with timing signals and data cables, small pulses of light that keep systems synchronized. Alter those signals, and you could disrupt industries like high-frequency trading that rely on split-second accuracy. The worst-case scenario isn't just damage to one cable. It's a coordinated strike against nodes, places where multiple cables intersect. And in a conflict scenario, that could blind NATO's military communications at a critical moment. The UK and its allies are scrambling to respond. Britain is pushing forward a defensive system called the Atlantic Bastion, a ring of sensors and drones and seabed stations to monitor undersea activity. Norway and others are expanding patrols with warships and surveillance aircraft. Ireland, more vulnerable because it isn't a NATO member, has invested in sonar technology to monitor its waters. Still, many analysts say detection isn't enough. You can spot Yantar loitering over critical communication cables, but what then? Do you board it? Do you risk escalation? And does the West have enough ships and subs and drones to monitor every stretch of ocean where Russian operatives might be working? That's the dilemma of the undersea battlefield. It's invisible, it's critical, and it's increasingly contested. And unlike airspace violations, we've seen a number of those recently, where jets can scramble and intercept, proving sabotage underwater, well, that's a murkier endeavor. All right, coming up next, President Trump meets with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to discuss ending the Gaza conflict. And Vice President JD Vance criticizes Russia over its stalled war in Ukraine. So not so much poking the bear as mocking the bear. I'll be right back. Hey, Mike Baker here. Now, you know those nights when you just don't sleep? You know what I mean. You're tossing and you're turning and your mind is racing and, frankly, sleep just won't come. And the next day, of course, well, you're dragging, you're exhausted, and everything just feels harder. Well, that's where CBD from CB Distillery can make a real difference. But it's not just sleep products with CB Distillery. They've got solutions that work with your body to help with stress or pain after exercise, even mood and focus. And it's all made with the highest quality clean ingredients, and that's very important. There's no fillers, just premium CBD. Imagine waking up rested or enjoying your day without those nagging aches and pains. That's the real win of CB Distillery's solutions. And that's why over 2 million people, that's right, 2 million people trust CB Distillery. Look, I use their relief balm for after workouts because, again, at my age, you know what, every workout involves some pain. And the relief balm from CB Distillery really works. So if you're ready for better sleep, less stress, and just generally feeling better, try CBD from CB Distillery. And right now, you can save 25% off your entire purchase. Visit CB Distillery and use promo code PDB. That's cbdistillery.com, promo code PDB. Again, cbdistillery.com. Specific product availability depends on individual state regulations. Welcome back to the PDB. In the latest push to achieve peace in Gaza, the White House on Monday unveiled a 20-point plan with President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu together at a joint press conference to confirm the Jewish state's support for the plan. With the 2-year mark of Hamas's 7 October 2023 terror attacks looming, and just days after a wave of countries at the UN General Assembly recognized Palestinian statehood, the two leaders agreed on a blueprint that could end the war on their terms. The White House revealed the proposal just before Trump and Netanyahu stepped to the podium. Trimmed from the 21-point draft, so they trimmed off 1 point, we discussed last week, the latest plan includes an immediate ceasefire, a freeze on all Israeli airstrikes and artillery fire, and battle lines held in place while Jerusalem readies a staged troop withdrawal. As for the Israeli hostages, both living and dead, are to be returned within 72 hours of formal acceptance by all parties. In exchange, Israel would free 250 prisoners serving life terms, plus 1,700 Palestinians detained after the 7 October Hamas attacks, including all women and children. Hamas fighters who disarm would be offered amnesty or safe passage abroad. Who's going to take Hamas fighters? That's a question. While international and regional forces would police Gaza and train a reformed Palestinian security service. Crucially, Hamas would have no role in governance in the enclave. Instead, a transitional international authority would administer the Strip. Aid convoys would be restored at negotiated levels, and Washington would oversee talks meant to rebuild what Trump called, quote, a better Gaza. Of course, all this depends on Hamas agreeing to the conditions. In a major point, the president emphasized that Gaza will not be annexed or depopulated. That's a notable break from his earlier flirtations with relocation schemes for Palestinians to neighboring countries. In the press conference, Trump announced, quote, the hostages are coming back, but only upon implementation of the deal, warning that Hamas is currently the only holdout after Israel's acceptance. Trump framed the peace deal as the last off-ramp for the terror group to accept disarmament and coexistence, or face what he called the elimination of, quote, any danger posed in the region and that danger is caused by Hamas. The president made clear in saying that Netanyahu would have American backing to, quote, do what he has to do if Hamas refuses to sign on. Speaking after Trump, Netanyahu hailed the deal as a, quote, critical step toward Israel's war aims and wider regional peace, but did caution that if Hamas balks at the deal, Israel would, quote, finish the job. The commander-in-chief of the U.S. expressed confidence that Hamas will fold, arguing its leadership has been decimated in the nearly 2-year-long war. But the reality is that they've failed to agree to past potential ceasefires, and the likelihood that they'll agree to return all the hostages at the outset, their only leverage, frankly, at this point, or to disarm, or to play no role in governance, it all seems unlikely. The sequencing of the 20-point plan gives Israel leverage and undercuts Hamas's demands, an arrangement the terror group is almost certain to highlight in its coming reply. Beyond that, Hamas has long rejected disarmament and any outside administration of Gaza, again making acceptance unlikely. Okay, shifting gears. 3 years on, and 1 million casualties later, not to mention the mounting economic pain, Russia's war machine is grinding itself into the mud. At least, that was Vice President JD Vance's verdict, mocking that Moscow has, quote, very little to show for its invasion of Ukraine. Appearing on Fox News Sunday, Vance said he, quote, wasn't surprised at all by the ongoing battlefield stalemate. He contrasted the present paralysis with the late Biden period and even earlier this year when Moscow was still making some progress, although very slow and at a high cost. And, of course, at the start of the war, well, Russia looked unstoppable. But, of course, not anymore. Over the summer, Russian forces hurled everything they had, waves of conscripts, barrages of missiles and artillery, swarms of drones and glide bombs at Ukraine's east as part of their highly touted offensive. And although the Russians slowly pushed Ukrainian defenders back into rural areas of the Luhansk and Donetsk area, also known as the Donbass, the army failed to conquer cities that serve as defensive strongholds. And now, the Kremlin finds itself in a bloody standstill, with Moscow hemorrhaging lives and resources, and nothing tangible to show for it. Vance, in his interview, said President Trump has repeatedly urged Russia in recent weeks to take peace talks seriously, but the Kremlin has repeatedly shrugged him off. And that, Vance argued, explains Trump's pivot. As we discussed last week, after hinting for months that Kyiv might need to cede territory to achieve peace with Russia, Trump executed a sharp U-turn. Now he says Ukraine can reclaim all of its lost ground, some 20% of its territory, and perhaps, quote, go further. The shift followed his sit-down with Ukrainian President Zelensky at the UN General Assembly. On Truth Social, Trump wrote that Russia's economic freefall and battlefield stagnation mean, quote, Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win, he wrote that in all caps, all of Ukraine back to its original form. He doubled down, dismissing Russia outright as a, quote, paper tiger. Economic analysts say Western sanctions have gutted Moscow's energy exports, shrinking the Kremlin's war chest. With Russia's budget deficit widening, the government is now looking to tax hikes to prop up military spending. Sources told the New York Post that fresh intelligence on Russia's unraveling economy is driving the administration's sharper tone. Zelensky suggested Trump's growing disillusionment with Russian President Vladimir Putin is also a factor. The Alaska summit last month, meant to probe a path toward peace, only deepened the frustration as Moscow responded with fresh missile barrages in Ukraine, along with Russian fighter jets and drones flying close to U.S. airspace and violating NATO skies. With Putin dug in and rejecting peace talks, the White House is pressing NATO allies to squeeze harder, this time with secondary tariffs targeting Russian oil buyers, one of the Kremlin's last reliable lifelines. Vance wrapped up his interview with Fox News with a reminder that, quote, we're going to keep on working for peace, and we hope the Russians actually wake up to the reality on the ground, end quote. All right, coming up next in today's Back of the Brief, a government shutdown looms as Democrats and Republicans scramble to find a deal before today's midnight deadline. More on that when we come back. Hey, Mike Baker here. I want to take just a moment of your time to talk about my favorite purveyor of steaks and beef, and that, of course, would be the company, the Great Tri-Tails Beef. That's right. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, it's back-to-school season, Well, and you know what that means. That means the usual chaos around the house. You got constant shuttling of kids to school and sports events, and you got regular disagreements over what's for dinner when parents and kids are all running in different directions. Well, the terrific folks at Tri-Tails Beef, they know that feeling. They're a fifth-generation family-run Texas ranch that understands that feeding a family during busy times is no small feat. So this month, they're making it easier. When you grab their Feed the Family box, you'll get 2 pounds of premium ground beef for free. That's tacos or burgers or spaghetti or chili, whatever the gang demands. It's real beef, pasture-raised, grain-finished, dry-aged. There's no fillers, no mystery meat, no middlemen, and there's no microwavable shapes for dinner. So if you're ready to reclaim dinner from the jaws of school year chaos, head to trybeef.com/PDB. That's trybeef.com/PDB. Because remember, frozen nuggets, they're not a food group. And your family, well, they deserve the best. In today's Back of the Brief, like the Swallows returning to Capistrano, the U.S. government appears to be heading for a shutdown. Oh, again? In what's become a symbol of Washington's perennial dysfunction, less than 24 hours remain before federal funding runs out. And after a high-profile White House meeting yesterday, the odds of avoiding a closure look relatively slim. President Trump gathered congressional leaders from both parties in what was billed as a final negotiating session. But instead of a breakthrough, both sides walked out pointing fingers. Vice President JD Vance summed up the Republican view bluntly, saying, quote, "I think we're headed to a shutdown because the Democrats won't do the right thing," end quote. Of course, Democrats don't see it that way. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said the parties have very large differences, accusing Republicans of pushing a stopgap spending bill crafted without any input from the Democrats. Schumer argued it's, quote, up to the Republicans whether they want to shut down or not, end quote. At the center of the fight is what's known as a continuing resolution, a CR, essentially a short-term patch to keep the government funded. Republicans, who control the White House and hold slim majorities in both chambers, want a clean resolution that extends current spending levels until late November. Democrats are insisting that any stopgap bill must include protections for programs like enhanced Obamacare tax credits, which are set to expire at year's end. Republicans argue Democrats are holding the process hostage with new demands. Democrats counter that the GOP is freezing them out entirely. This sounds like a schoolyard fight between toddlers. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, a Republican, accused Democrats of, quote, purely and simply hostage-taking. Schumer fired back, saying Republicans are forcing through a bill with, quote, not one iota of Democratic input. This standoff has already sunk multiple short-term funding proposals earlier this month, where Republicans fell short of the 60 votes needed to overcome a filibuster in the Senate. If no deal is reached, the shutdown begins at midnight tonight. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers will be furloughed or forced to work without pay, or perhaps laid off permanently. Services from national parks to passport processing will halt, and markets will, of course, again brace for turbulence. For now, as is usual with these almost yearly exercises, Washington seems more focused on assigning blame and playing politics than running an efficient, fiscally responsible, and cohesive government. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Tuesday, the 30th of September. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And don't forget to check out and subscribe to our highly acclaimed and much-loved and perhaps one day award-winning YouTube channel. Now, you can find that on YouTube, of course, by going to @President's Daily Brief. I'm Mike Baker. I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool. Hey, Mike Baker here. Let me ask you a question about protecting your hard-earned assets. When you hear about inflation worries, or when you see that the national debt in the U.S. is over $37 trillion, or you just look around and you see all the global uncertainty, do you ever think to yourself, maybe now would be a good time to buy gold? Well, that would be a logical thought. You see, whether as a hedge against inflation or a peace of mind during global uncertainty, or maybe just for sensible diversification, gold has always been viewed as a safe haven. And the Birch Gold Group, they believe every American should own physical gold. So they've created something special. Until September 30th, that would be until the end of today, frankly, we're here were landed on September 30th, so you have to act now. If you're a first-time gold buyer, Birch Gold is offering a rebate of up to $10,000 in free metals on qualifying purchases. To claim eligibility and start the process, request an information kit now, because it is September 30th. Just text PDB to 989-898. Plus, Birch Gold can help you roll an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. And you're still eligible for a rebate in free metals of up to $10,000. Find out why tens of thousands of happy customers trust Birch Gold Group. And make right now the time to decide if gold is right for you. And take advantage of a rebate up to $10,000 when you buy by September 30th. Text PDB to 989-898. Claim your eligibility and get your free information kit. Again, text PDB to 989-898.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.